My sister didn't wait for the candles or the blessing. Right in the middle of Dad's birthday dinner, she stood up, raised her glass, and announced loud enough for the whole table to freeze that she was the only one with access to his bank accounts. Heads turned like she'd cracked the air in two. No whisper, no hesitation, just loud, smug certainty. And everyone? They smiled like it was something to be impressed by. Everyone except Dad. His hand trembled just barely, but I caught it. I didn't speak up. Didn't challenge her. I just sat there, holding on to the weight of that phone call I got from the bank earlier, knowing deep down that we were seconds away from the cracks in our family becoming impossible to ignore. Tell me, what would you have done? My name's Rose. And the weird thing about growing up in my family is how easy it is to vanish, even when you're right there at the table. People laugh, they chat, they toast. But your voice? It just slips through the cracks before anyone notices it was even there. That's always been me and Emily. She fills the room. I hold it steady. She shines. I'm the one keeping the background from falling apart. Everyone thinks I'm the quiet one because I'm shy. Truth is, it's quieter than that. I learned early on that in our house, keeping the peace mattered more than telling the truth. If Emily was glowing, we all acted like the light warmed us. If Mom said things were fine, then fine was the only option. And when Dad stumbled or forgot something, we just looked the other way, pretending we didn't see it. It was easier than facing what might actually be going on. Still, Dad and I had our own rhythm. When numbers confused him or reminders popped up on his phone, and he couldn't remember if he'd already paid something, he'd call me. I never made a big deal about it. I'd stop by after work, help him sort through the usual stack of bills, sip tea in that creaky old Denver kitchen, and slip out before anyone could say I was playing favorites. In our family, even kindness had to stay quiet. But last fall, I started noticing little things. Not dramatic moments, just the kind of slips that wouldn't have happened before. A long pause. A detail missed. A question asked again just minutes after it had already been answered. I brought it up to Mom once. She brushed my hand and said, "He's just tired, Rose. Don't start worrying." Emily? Same reaction. And once Emily dismissed it, the subject was off limits. Like her opinion was the final word. Then the bank called. I was at work, knee-deep in budget reports, surrounded by the soft drone of printers and background chatter. A bank rep asked me to confirm some recent activity on Dad's account. I figured it was routine. It wasn't. She read off a list of large withdrawals all happening too close together. Then asked if Dad had approved an extra card request tied to the account. When she said it came from a family member, I didn't need her to say the name. I already knew. I asked for time to look into it. She agreed. The call ended. The heaviness didn't. I wanted to talk to Dad before his birthday, gently, quietly, just the two of us. I even wrote out my questions, tucked them in my planner like a promise to myself. But life doesn't wait for the perfect moment. His birthday came fast. There were candles, laughter, relatives who still thought everything was fine. And Emily, of course it was Emily, picked that night right in front of everyone to make sure we all knew exactly how much control she thought she had. Dad's birthday dinner was held at a little spot in Denver. The kind of restaurant with warm lighting and exposed brick that tries to make every gathering feel cozy, even if it's not. By the time I got there, half the family had already arrived. Coats were slung over chairs, silverware clinked softly, and someone was already bugging the waiter about dessert before the entrees were even ordered. Everything looked normal, which somehow made the tension in my chest worse. The call from the bank still echoed in the back of my mind, but I tried to push it down, at least long enough for Dad to enjoy his night. He looked good. Tired, sure. There was a weight in his shoulders I hadn't seen at previous birthdays. But when he hugged me, his smile was real. He asked if I brought the candles he liked. I had, of course. I always did. It was one of those small things he relied on me for. Details no one else noticed until they were missing. Emily showed up 15 minutes late, sweeping into the room in a glittery dress that turned every head. She apologized like she'd just come from saving the planet, and Mom greeted her like she was meeting a queen. The way they welcomed her compared to how they'd greeted me, it was subtle but sharp enough to leave a sting. I wasn't mad, just reminded. During appetizers, conversation drifted from vacation plans to work stories to the usual half-finished home projects people like to pretend they'd complete. Dad laughed here and there, but I noticed his eyes drifting sometimes, like he'd lost track of the thread and was quietly trying to find it again. At one point, he leaned over and asked me what we'd just been talking about. Something simple like Emily's new side table. I answered quietly, not wanting to draw attention. Mom noticed just enough to shoot me a disapproving look, not because of what was happening but because I acknowledged it. Then Emily tapped her glass. 3 crisp little chimes like a spotlight flicking on. She stood with a smile that said she'd been rehearsing this moment in her head for weeks. "I want to make a little toast," she said, resting a hand on Dad's shoulder like she'd always been the one holding him up. Dad looked at her, confused but courteous. She raised her glass higher. "Most of you know I've been helping Dad with his finances lately." Some relatives nodded. Mom murmured something that sounded like gratitude. Emily kept going, her voice clear and proud. "And now I'm the only one with bank access. So no worries, Dad's completely taken care of." The room responded exactly how she wanted, smiles, soft laughs, a few toasts raised in her direction. That kind of easy praise always landed at Emily's feet. But Dad didn't smile. His jaw tightened just enough for me to see it, and something in my chest split wide open. Everyone else kept grinning, completely clueless about what that toast really meant. They hadn't heard Dad's confused call last month, asking how to check a balance he'd already looked at. They hadn't spoken with the bank about suspicious withdrawals. They didn't know he'd signed paperwork naming me as the second safety contact on his account. But I knew. And in that moment, I saw it all flickering behind my eyes like a warning flare. Emily stood there soaking in the attention. Mom dabbed at her eyes like the toast had moved her. And me? I sat still, pulse turning steady and cold. I wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. The applause faded fast, drowned out by soft background music and the clatter of dishes being cleared. But the silence between Dad and me? That stuck around, heavy in the air, thick enough to taste. He wouldn't look at me. Instead, he focused on the creases in his napkin, like they might somehow rescue him from the moment. I recognized that expression. It wasn't pure confusion, it was the fear of it. The fear of not remembering something everyone else seemed convinced he'd already agreed to. When dinner wrapped up, people lingered near the entrance, trading hugs, laughing, making those familiar promises to get together more often. Even though we all knew it probably wouldn't happen. Emily absorbed every compliment like it was fuel. She never once looked in my direction. Maybe she figured I was too small to matter. Or maybe she'd already decided Dad's bank account was hers now, and whatever came with that didn't concern her. Outside, the Denver air was sharp and cold, the kind that jolts you awake whether you're ready or not. I pulled my coat tighter and waited as Dad slowly walked toward me. Mom hovered at his side, smiling a little too hard, like her expression alone could glue the family together. "You were pretty quiet tonight," she said. Her voice wasn't curious. It was edged, more warning than question. "I didn't have much to say," I replied. And that was true. Just not yet. Emily finally stepped out, her heels clicking against the pavement. "Thanks again for tonight," she said to Dad, slipping her arm through his. "I'll stop by tomorrow to finish up the rest of the paperwork." Dad stiffened. It was subtle, but I felt it like a tremor under the ground. "What paperwork?" he asked. I watched irritation flash across Emily's face before she smoothed it into a gentle smile. "Don't worry about that, Dad. You already signed everything." "Signed what?" he asked again. Mom cut in fast. "He's tired. Let's not get into details right now." But I couldn't ignore the tight feeling twisting in my gut. This wasn't a one-time slip anymore. Dad's uncertainty was turning into a pattern, and Emily was relying on it. She needed him unsure. She needed him quiet. She needed everyone else convinced she was just being helpful. I walked them to their car and told them I'd stop by the next day. Mom looked relieved, like she expected me to smooth things over and make the tension disappear. Emily didn't look relieved at all. She looked irritated. She never liked it when I got involved, especially in things she wanted full control over. When I got home, I switched on the smallest lamp in my living room, the one that cast a soft, warm circle over the coffee table. I pulled out the folder Dad kept tucked away, policies, bank statements, payment logs, and spread everything out in front of me. It didn't take long. Withdrawals stacked too close together. Notes written in Dad's handwriting that didn't sound like him. A request form signed by Emily where his name should have been. My hands were steady. I didn't feel panicked or overwhelmed. I felt calm. Too calm. Like my mind had already made a decision before I consciously caught up to it. This wasn't confusion. It wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. And patterns only break when someone finally stops looking away. I leaned back, staring at the papers under the warm glow of the lamp, and felt something inside me lock into place. The truth needed somewhere to land, and it wasn't going to wait another day. The next morning felt unnaturally quiet, like the hours themselves were holding their breath. I drove to Dad's house just before noon, half expecting Emily's car to already be parked out front. It wasn't. That should have eased me. Instead, my pulse picked up. Emily liked staying one step ahead of me. If she hadn't shown up yet, it meant she was planning something bigger than just getting there first. Dad opened the door slowly, leaning a little heavier against the frame than usual. His face lit up when he saw me, but there was a tiredness behind his eyes, like he'd been wrestling with thoughts he couldn't quite make sense of. Inside, morning light spilled across the kitchen table, where a half-finished cup of tea sat next to his glasses. He motioned for me to sit down, rubbing his forehead as he lowered himself into the chair across from me. "Rose," he said, "did we talk about something yesterday? Something I just can't seem to remember." My heart sank. Not because he'd forgotten, but because he knew he'd forgotten. That awareness was its own kind of pain. I kept my voice gentle. "We didn't really get the chance to talk, Dad. But we need to now." Before I could go on, a car door slammed outside. Emily's heels clicked up the walkway. Mom was right behind her, carrying a thick folder that instantly made my jaw clench. They walked in like they owned the place, no knock, no pause. Just that entitled kind of entrance people use when they're sure they belong more than you do. Emily's smile was way too cheerful. "Perfect timing," she said. "I brought the rest of the documents Dad needs to finalize." "Finalize what?" Dad asked, his brow furrowing. She ignored him. Mom didn't even glance at me. I stood slowly. "We're not signing anything today." Emily turned to me, her smile fading. "This doesn't concern you, Rose." "It concerns Dad," I said evenly. "And the bank." That landed like a lightning strike. Emily stopped mid-step. Mom froze, papers still in hand. Dad's gaze darted between our faces, trying to make sense of the sudden tension. "What are you talking about?" Emily asked, her voice tight. I pulled the printed bank statements from my bag and set them on the table. Withdrawal records. A rejected request for an additional card. Dad stared down at them like the words were written in a foreign language. "I got a call," I said, keeping my tone steady. "They flagged these transactions. They were concerned something might be wrong." Mom bristled. "You should have come to us first." "I was going to," I said. "But after last night, that changed." Emily let out a scoff. "Oh, come on. Because of a toast? You're being dramatic." "You said you had full bank access," I reminded her. "In front of everyone." "Because I do," she snapped. Dad turned to her, confused. "Since when?" Emily faltered just for a second. "But I saw it. Dad, we talked about this. You said I could help. You signed the forms." He shook his head slowly. "I don't remember doing that." Mom jumped in too fast. "You were tired that day, sweetheart. Let's not turn this into something bigger than it is." But I wasn't watching her. I was watching Emily, and she was unraveling. "I'm the one the bank called," I said. "Because Dad listed me as his safety contact. They wanted to verify whether a family member had been making large withdrawals on his behalf." Emily's voice cut like glass. "Are you accusing me of stealing?" "I'm asking you to explain," I said. Her face flushed. "This is ridiculous." I took a breath, turned to Dad. "Did you authorize these payments?" "All of them." His face twisted with confusion. I thought I did. Or maybe, I don't know anymore." Emily jumped on that. "See? He forgets things, Rose. That's why I'm helping." "No," I said quietly. "That's why you're taking advantage." The silence that followed was charged, sharp enough to sting. Mom sucked in a breath. Emily's jaw dropped. Then her voice cracked into something shrill and high-pitched, something I'd never heard from her before. "Called about what, Dash?" It was the same sharp tone she'd used at dinner, but this time there was no crowd to impress, just the truth pressing in from all sides. About irregular activity, I said. About a card requested in your name. About withdrawals Dad didn't authorize. Dad turned to Emily, eyes wide, his expression flickering with something close to fear. Emily, did you do that? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. When she finally spoke, her voice was tight. I was just trying to make things easier. You've been overwhelmed. Mom jumped in, but her voice cracked. I didn't tell you to take money. I pulled out one last sheet of paper and laid it on the table. This is the request for the additional card. That signature? It's yours, not Dad's. Emily lunged toward it. I stepped back, keeping it out of reach. Dad pushed himself up from the table, using both hands for support. You forged my name, he said, his voice low and trembling. That's not what happened, Emily stammered. I filled it out because you said. I didn't say that, he whispered. I wouldn't. His shoulders started to shake, not from anger, but from the gut punch of realizing someone he trusted had used his confusion as a smokescreen. Emily's tone shifted. Dad, come on. I was helping. I've always helped. No, he said, voice quivering. Rose has always helped. Those words didn't feel like a victory. They felt like loss, like grief changing shape. Emily stepped back, eyes darting between us, hoping someone would fall back into the old routine, where I stayed quiet and she got the spotlight. But the routine was gone, and she knew it. Give me your keys, Dad said suddenly. Emily blinked. What? The house keys. The bank documents. Everything. You can't be serious. But he was. He held out his hand. It shook, but not from doubt. When she didn't move, he turned to me. Call the bank, Rose. Tell them I want all access revoked except yours. And ask them to look into the rest. Mom gasped. Emily went pale. You're choosing her over me, Dash? She choked out. I'm choosing the truth, Dad said. And the truth is, I don't trust you right now. Emily covered her mouth, breathing hard. You'll regret this. Dad shook his head. I already regret what I didn't see. She spun around and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. No one said a word for a long time. Then Dad turned to me, eyes full of glassy regret. I'm sorry, Rose. I should have listened. I should have seen it. I should have. I reached over and took his hand. You trusted the wrong person. It happens. What matters is what you do next. He nodded slowly and sank into his chair. For the first time in years, the house felt real. Broken, yes, but finally honest. The bank didn't waste time. By the next morning, they confirmed all of Emily's access had been revoked. They launched an internal review, and for the first time in months, Dad looked like he could breathe again. The weight on his shoulders eased, replaced by something fragile but real clarity. He asked me to sit with him while we worked through the rest of the paperwork. Each time I guided him through a form or reminded him of a small detail, I could see his hands steady just a little more. Mom floated in and out of the room, quieter than she'd ever been. The confidence she always wore like armor was gone. She didn't defend Emily anymore. She didn't blame me either. She just seemed smaller, like someone who had finally realized how dangerous blind loyalty can be. Emily never came back to the house. She sent Dad one short message. No anger. No apology. Just a clipped line. I need some space. He read the message twice, then set the phone down face first and murmured, Space is good. In the quiet that followed, something shifted. It wasn't victory. It wasn't revenge. It was the calm, steady feeling of a family beginning to rebuild. This time on ground that finally felt solid. Over the next few weeks, Dad and I found a new rhythm. Slower. Softer. More honest than anything we'd had in years. We didn't talk much about Emily. Some wounds don't need words to be understood. But he trusted me now, completely. And that trust felt like the start of something deeper than forgiveness. It felt like finally moving forward. If you've ever had to protect someone you love from the people they thought they could trust, share your story in the comments. And stick with me.